Month I published a video in which I explained how the Earth's crust is becoming extremely unstable, and the fact that volcanic activity has increased by leaps and bounds since 1980. In addition to the numbers of volcanoes that are violently erupting, I explained how seismic activity has also increased, especially earthquakes that are registering 6.0 or larger on the Richter scale. Now, there are some of you who continue to argue that this is nonsense, but I beg to differ with those individuals, as the charts and the data are conclusive. They accurately describe what is taking place, and the facts do not lie. Rather, they tell a story of what is happening in terrific terms across the globe. Something quite strange is happening within the core of the Earth that even researchers are at odds to explain. So that you can have a better understanding of the changes that are taking place right now as we speak, let's go back 3 years to 2013. This was one of those interesting records of a seismic event that took place, an earthquake that seismologists admit should never have happened. I'm referring to the massive quake of magnitude 8.3 that took place in the Sea of Okhotsk at a depth of 609 kilometers, which is approximately 378 miles below the surface of the Earth. So you might say, what is the big deal with this quake? Well, to be precise, it was not the magnitude of the earthquake that was the most alarming, but rather it was the depth of this event that had the scientific community scratching their heads. Now, this particular event was not the deepest event to take place on Earth. There was one other that occurred in 1994 in Bolivia at a depth of 640 kilometers with a magnitude of 8.2. So, it was similar in magnitude, but just a little deeper in depth. But the reason why seismologists were struggling to explain how the Okhotsk event happened is that intense pressure on a fault should inhibit this type of rupture that actually took place in 2013. So the mystery here is how these types of earthquakes can happen. The biggest question being, how can rock slide against rock so quickly while squeezed by the pressure from 378 miles of overlying rock? Seismic analysis revealed that this 2013 event was the largest deep earthquake ever recorded, some 30% larger than that of the next largest, which was the 1994 earthquake 640 kilometers beneath Bolivia. Deep earthquakes occur in the transition zone between the upper mantle and the lower mantle, from 400 to 700 kilometers below the surface. They result from stress in a deep subducted slab where one plate of the Earth's crust dives beneath another plate. Such deep earthquakes usually don't cause enough shaking on the surface to be hazardous, but scientifically they are of great interest. The energy released by the Sea of Okhotsk earthquake produced vibrations recorded by several thousand seismic stations around the world, as this video from Princeton University is showing. So this brings us to another very interesting event that occurred just last month. I'm referring to the May 29th quake in Bolivia. Now, there wasn't anything exceptional about this event. It was a rather modest quake that registered 4.3. But something did take place that should have us a bit worried, as it was a quake that registered 562 kilometers deep in the earth. I'm not sure if most of you realize how extreme that is, but just think how far down just 1 kilometer or mile is, and you quickly realize how astonishing 562 kilometers deep in the earth actually is. Take a look at this image, which will give you a visual idea of what I am referring to. You may be thinking that this is just another rare, odd event. But it now seems that it isn't as rare as it should be these days. Most discerning is the numbers of deep quakes that are actually taking place just in the past few months. A strong and very deep earthquake registered by the USGS as 6.1 magnitude hit Bolivia at 3:25 UTC on January the 14th of 2016. The agency reported a depth of 582.4 kilometers or 361.9 miles in depth. So that's 2 rare extreme deep quakes in Bolivia this year alone. It gets a little more chilling to add to the strangeness of the fact that there's already been 2 of these this year already, where normally we probably would see 1 or 2 the whole year at this depth. Suddenly on May 27th, a 6.4 quake hit N.W.O Island, Fiji, at a depth of 572.1 kilometers. And then a 6.6 hit the following day at a depth of 416.8 kilometers. So now we have 4 rare extreme deep quakes already this year. Very strange developments that are occurring so far in 2016. An unusual feature of the 1994 Bolivia earthquake was that it was felt in North American cities at distances of 50 to 80 degrees from the epicenter. Most earthquakes are shallow. They are concentrated no deeper than 20 to 25 kilometers down. However, a few extremely deep quakes rumble at depths of about 600 kilometers. On June 8, 1994, what may be the largest deep earthquake of the century, of magnitude 8.2, ruptured 640 kilometers beneath Bolivia. The Bolivian quake also caused the whole earth to ring like a bell. Every 20 minutes or so, the entire planet expanded and contracted at a detectable amount. This would probably create the thought that the planet must be breaking apart. Why are these deep earthquakes even able to happen when scientifically they should not be possible? What could be causing them? Could it be an unseen external force acting on our planet? Or is it just some type of natural occurrence that we've yet to understand? So I have taken a tally of what is occurring deep within the earth this year. And these deep quake events just keep coming. As you can see from this list, we have had 5 deep earthquakes of at least 400 kilometers, most of them much deeper in just the first week of June. Something very strange that no one has been able to explain so far is taking place. There is no doubt that this is a proportionately high number of deep quakes, and we are only into the first half of this year. There are other strange and mysterious occurrences happening in recent days that are equally disturbing and which have researchers puzzled as to their origin. Large bodies of water are disappearing, some of them in the blink of an eye, as was the case with Lake Riesco in Asen, Patagonia, Chile. As you can see from these images taken in late May, this once robust and picturesque lake has completely disappeared from the landscape. Now take a look at this raw video footage taken by a resident of Asen, showing shocking and dramatic images of the desiccated and drying lake. Nobody knows what's happening there. The lack of information from any official researchers increases the mystery. Could it be a sinkhole or a geological fault that runs from north to south and thus may have drained large volumes of lake water? If this is the case, there will be important manifestations of this change. A sinkhole or a giant crack formed in the middle of the lake could be another origin for the drainage of the lake. As for now, there has been no official explanations. The lack of information increases the mystery surrounding Lake Riesco. Another body of water that disappeared within a day took place in China in late May. As this image reveals, a large sinkhole resembling a crater suddenly opened up and drained the pond of some 25 tons of fish. The cause of this event has not been officially identified. In Mexico, the Atoyac River, which crosses 8 municipalities in the central mountainous area of eastern Mexican state of Veracruz, disappeared overnight in March of this year after a giant crack opened up. Inhabitants of Rancho San Fermin reported hearing a bang and feeling the earth rumbling as the ground cracked open. One of the most disturbing events that has happened recently is a report coming out of Wyoming that suggests that the North American continent is beginning to crack in an area of the Bighorn Mountains east of the Yellowstone supervolcano. Estimates by some put the crack at 750 yards long, by 50 yards wide, and by 50 feet deep, and continuing to grow. As shown in these images, this is not a small event, and the U.S. Geological Survey confirms there were no earthquakes in the area before, during, or after the crack developed. It appears the continent itself is shearing rather than shifting. As a matter of reference, it is shifting and slipping that causes earthquakes, while shearing quietly takes place as the land tears. The crack is also lengthening and spreading, getting wider and longer, without explanation. It is not yet known if this is a precursor to an event by the Yellowstone supervolcano located miles to the west of this location. But according to Dr. Stephen Folks at the Society of Professional Geologists, the enormity of the supervolcano and its ability to impact things hundreds of miles from its massive underground magma chamber makes this a situation that bears close watching. All over the planet, global weather patterns have gone wild. Just over the past few days, we have seen life-threatening heat waves, extremely dangerous wildfires, vicious tornadoes, and unprecedented flooding. And that is just in the United States. This is just the continuation of a trend that stretches back to last year, when extremely weird weather created apocalyptic-like conditions in many areas around the world, as this video clip will show.
With some breaking and historic news out of California, as Governor Jerry Brown has ordered mandatory water restrictions for the very first time in the state's history.
This is huge. You know the song California Dreamin'? Well, the people of California are dreaming about one thing: rain. When is it going to rain? 25% mandatory across the board cuts. This is unprecedented. I was raised in California. I've never seen anything even close to this, with 98% of the state in a state of drought.
To give you a sense of just how dire the drought is, we want to share some before and after photos with you. First, this is what Half Dome looked like back in March of 2011. You see blanketed here with snow, an awful lot of snow all around. However, this is what Half Dome looked like this March. Barely any snow at all, just bare rock.
And to the extreme weather in the heartland tonight, and new information coming in on the size and scope of those deadly tornadoes. One outside Tulsa, turns out it was an EF2, and that tornado in Moore, Oklahoma, an EF1. These were significant twisters, terror as they touched down, and just listen to this.
Oh my God! Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Okay, there it is, right there. It's right in front of us.
The tornadoes that swept Oklahoma lit power transformers like they were firecrackers.
David, we just had power flashes right in there.
The strongest had winds as high as 135 miles per hour. This is the path of last night's tornado. It's similar to the path taken by 4 major tornadoes in the past 16 years.
A shocker this morning for the driver of this car who was in the vehicle when it plunged through the pavement in the parking lot of a commercial building near Black Creek in Eglinton.
A massive sinkhole has opened up there.
Such a striking sight. Even the work crews had to take a moment to snap a picture. A Jaguar XJ in a massive pit of icy water.
Well, it happened so fast. The only thing that was running through my mind was, I just need to get out of here.
Intense flooding forcing people to evacuate a tourist bus that was sitting on a highway in Brazil. Moments after they evacuated, you can see a huge sinkhole swallowed. We're happy to report and no injuries.
I have never seen anything like that. We've had all sorts of sinkholes, not that big, out in LA, but I've never seen anything.
Welcome back. Now, hurricane-force winds have blasted northern Europe in one of the most powerful storms in years, killing at least 9 people and causing millions of euros in damage.
Air passengers had a scary landing at Munich airport, with pilots fighting to keep the plane on course for the runway during the howling gale. This landing was aborted as it was made its final approach into London's Luton airport. Now, hundreds of flights were abandoned across Europe.
Around 24,000 people in the Philippines have been evacuated, with Typhoon Maysak a day away from potentially striking the country's northeast coast. Storm surges, flash floods, and landslides remain potential threats.
Out of Russia, these guys just standing on the side of a river taking some video, and all of a sudden there is a wall of something coming directly at them. And look how fast that bridge disappears. Anybody have any guesses as to what that is? We've seen things like this before, like a dust storm where you see that big wall of dust coming in. Sometimes a summer shower, a downpour, you can see it moving in. This is neither of those. Guess what this is? Yeah, you see that stuff falling out of the sky? No, that's not volcanic ash. That is snow.
And to some frightening moments in the skies over Seattle. 2 separate planes struck by lightning as they tried to land during severe weather.
They are striking pictures. Not just one, but 2 jets hit by lightning over Seattle. Last night's storm around the airport hit the jets as they were preparing to land.
The heaviest rain in 80 years is triggering deadly mudslides in South America. This is southern Peru near Chile. A river of mud ran through town yesterday with the power to wash away cars. At least 24 have died in what's supposed to be the driest time of year.
The scale of the flooding has been difficult to believe. In southwestern Peru, it almost submerged this bridge. Further north, The rain brought down this landslide right in front of emergency workers. Copiapo is the capital of the Atacama region, normally one of the driest places on Earth. It's taken the authorities completely by surprise. Meanwhile, other parts of Chile are suffering from drought. The chaotic weather is testing the country's resilience.
We're going to start here with some pretty serious overnight developments from the flood zone in the mid-south.
It was a night of incredible water rescues after torrential rain triggered major flash flooding.
Overnight, more than 30 million Americans dealing with a deadly string of storms. Tornado warning sirens sounding the alarms as hail, torrential rains, and wind up to 68 miles per hour battered Tennessee, causing power outages in thousands of homes and reports of dime-sized hail in Georgia. In Kentucky Friday, roads collapsing as rushing waters tear through neighborhoods. This morning, firefighters are still battling a fire at this GE plant believed to be sparked by lightning. Overnight in Alabama, up to 5 strikes hitting every minute. Wow! Lighting up the skies.
Surveying the rubble and remains of his hometown, a high schooler in Moore, Oklahoma, came across a power pole that was split and hanging from the storm. Inspired by the image before him, he tweeted a picture of the site and called it, "God is with us."
So why is this happening? For decades, we could count on weather patterns falling within fairly predictable parameters, but now that is suddenly changing. All over the globe, we are seeing things happen that we have never seen happen before, and the weather just seems to get even more bizarre with each passing month. Consider what has been going on in the first few days of June. Let's start with the life-threatening heat wave that is currently taking place. The West Coast is in the grip of a life-threatening triple-digit heat wave that is set to continue well into next week, raising the risk of wildfires. The National Weather Service has issued excessive heat warnings for southeastern California, southern Nevada, western and southern Arizona, western Oregon, and far southwest Washington. From Oregon to Nevada, temperatures are set to top 100 degrees tomorrow and into Monday, with Phoenix, Arizona predicted to top out at 116 degrees. These are temperatures that you might expect to see in July or August, but right now summer has not even officially begun yet. As this article has stated, these extremely high temperatures bring with them a much higher risk of wildfires. In fact, firefighters in Southern California are currently fighting a dangerous fire that is raging wildly out of control, and that has already forced thousands of people out of their homes, as this video is showing. 2015 was the worst year for wildfires in all of U.S. history. More acres burned in the United States last year than we have ever seen before. And so far this year, we are more than 1 million acres ahead of the pace set in 2015. Meanwhile, CNN is reporting that this is the second year in a row that Texas has been hit by 500-year floods. The odds of that happening are infinitely small. The United States has now been hit by 10 major flooding events since the end of last September. That is more than one major flood event for every month since October of 2015. So that you may have a better understanding of the significance of these events, take a look at each of the events in order of their occurrence. We begin with October of last year, where violent storms in Southern California caused flash flooding that buried some highways in rivers of mud that were up to 6 feet deep. Hundreds of vehicles got buried in the fast-moving mud, and the lifeless body of one man that had his vehicle completely encased by several feet of mud was recovered only after a few days had passed, because that is how long it took emergency workers to dig him out. In the same month, Hurricane Patricia hit the Mexican coast. It was the second most intense tropical cyclone ever recorded in the entire world, and remnants from that storm caused absolutely horrible flooding in some parts of Texas. The floodwaters were moving so fast at one point that a freight train was actually knocked entirely off the tracks. In November of 2015, a slew of violent storms barreled into coastal areas of Oregon and Washington, causing nightmarish flooding in many areas. The resulting landslides and floods made headlines all over the country. In early December, we witnessed the wettest day in the history of Portland, Oregon, causing significant landslides and sinkholes. The middle part of the country experienced record-breaking flooding as the country rolled over from 2015 to 2016. The only thing that people could really compare it to was the Great Flood of 1993, and Missouri Governor Jay Nixon said that some communities saw floodwaters get to places they've never been to before. Normally, if the middle of the country is going to see flooding like this, it is going to take place when the snow begins to thaw in the spring. For something like this to happen in the middle of the winter was absolutely unprecedented. On January the 22nd, one of the worst East Coast blizzards in history slammed into Washington, D.C., New York City, and other major metropolitan areas. More than 3 feet of snow was dumped on some areas, hundreds of thousands of people were left without power, and coastal cities all along the eastern seaboard experienced flooding that was described as worse than Hurricane Sandy. It is also interesting to note that this storm was known as Jonas, which is actually a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew name Jonah. Jonah, of course, was a Hebrew prophet that was sent to the capital city of Assyria to warn that the judgment of God was coming. In March of this year, almost 2 feet of rain triggered historic flooding in parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Flooding along one area of the Sabine River broke the previous record by more than 5 feet, and some sections of Interstate 10 were closed for 4 days. This photo, taken at a restaurant situated on a bayou in Covington, Louisiana, shows the before and after image of just how severe the flooding was at this time. In April of this year, city officials in Houston declared that the flooding that struck that city was a life-threatening emergency, and substantial sections of Interstate 10 and Interstate 45 near downtown were fully underwater. Authorities admitted that water was getting to areas that it had never been to before, and fire department spokesman Jay Evans said that the water was 10 to 15 feet deep in some areas. In addition, Tropical Depression Bonnie caused absolutely nightmarish flooding in some parts of South Carolina. The tropical storm caused a holiday traffic nightmare on Interstate 95 Sunday after the storm system dumped heavy rain, causing road closures and miles-long backups. Officials said it would be hard to accurately describe just how bad things were in some parts of the state. At one point, it was being reported that traffic on Interstate 95 was backed up for more than 35 miles, and large stretches of the highway were completely underwater. Never before in U.S. history have we ever seen so many major floods in such a compressed period of time, and it just keeps coming. But don't worry, because all of this is perfectly normal, right? Here is a series of images from Texas, which saw unprecedented flooding this past week. These images paint a picture of the severity of the flooding throughout the state. Homes surrounded by floodwaters are shown in this aerial view in Rocheron, Texas. Parts of Texas have been inundated with rain in the last week, and more than half of the state has been under flood watches or warnings. A total of 16 people, including 9 soldiers from Fort Hood Army Base, have died in flooding across the state. This picture shows an isolated home in Richmond cut off because of the floodwaters. In this image, horses are forced to wade in floodwaters next to bales of hay after heavy rain drenched Texas farmlands. Here we see another home surrounded by floodwaters in Holiday Lakes, Texas. Dozens of roads across the state, including this one in Rocheron, were closed after they were engulfed. In this photo, this family home in Rocheron is completely surrounded by floodwaters. Here we see a man carrying a bicycle on his head as he and a woman walk through floodwaters near Holiday Lakes, Texas. And a home and a barn are separated by swaths of floodwaters that have ravaged Texas in the last week. And finally, we see an image that resembles a scene from an apocalyptic movie showing vehicles stranded on Interstate 45 in Houston. Across the Atlantic, Europe is also dealing with some extremely crazy weather. Major flooding is being reported all over the continent, and the French just experienced their wettest month since 1886. Check out this incredible video footage from southern Germany. Segments of France's border with Belgium received 6 weeks' worth of rain in under 24 hours earlier this week, causing widespread flooding across the country. May has been the country's rainiest month since 1886, according to Radio France International. As a result of that rain, French meteorologists expect the already swollen Seine River in Paris to peak at 21 feet above its usual level. The Louvre is closed due to flooding concerns, and workers have been busy moving priceless works of art as a precautionary measure. On the other side of the planet, many areas of India have been dealing with an unprecedented heat wave. On May 19th, the all-time record for the highest temperature ever recorded in India was broken. And this was part of a crippling heat wave that pushed temperatures in northern India above 104 degrees for weeks. The weather has killed hundreds of people and destroyed crops in more than 13 states, according to the Associated Press. If this happened where you live, you could just go inside and turn on the air conditioning. But most of those people do not have air conditioning, and that is why hundreds of them have been dying. At the exact same time when the crust of our planet is becoming increasingly unstable, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, our weather is starting to become increasingly unpredictable as well. Some of you are going to dismiss all of this as just a bizarre series of coincidences. Others will want to blame global warming. And yet others will see all of this as a sign that some unseen force is causing these bizarre and frightening events to take place. But what is truly frightening to consider is the question I am going to pose to you now. What if our weather just keeps getting more wild and more unpredictable? If our weather continues to spiral out of control, it is inevitable that there will be major famines, widespread riots, and tremendous political unrest all over the earth. Is our world equipped to be able to handle 7 billion people going absolutely mad all at once? I know that this presentation is not welcome news to many of you. It is not meant to be. What it is meant to do is to provide a basis whereby the viewer can better understand the forces that are at work between nature and a higher entity. Whatever is the cause of the troubling changes that are inflicting this planet, it is important to prepare ourselves with an open mind and a pure heart.